Okay, now we're not muted. All right, let's restart that. Florida, Georgia, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Probably one of my favorite weeks and games of the year. It has that rivalry vibe to me. I love going to this game. You don't have too many of those atmospheres that are 50-50 outside of like bowl games and conference championships. So to get one where it's a yearly basis, so you know the fans are going to travel. And when I say travel, it's like 2 hours from Gainesville, 3-4 hours away from Athens, Georgia. So it's not too much of a travel. But, excuse me, before we get to that, man, I want to talk about the great week of college football we've just witnessed. Let's start off with Florida's rivals, Miami and FSU. They just played their rivalry game, and Miami absolutely whooped FSU. Just continues to be an absolute dud of a season for the Seminoles. I mean, what was the score? 38-14? 36-14? I mean, you have Miami running up the score on them. That game was a bit closer than the final score indicates. Also wasn't. Miami was in control the entire time, so who cares about that? But Cam Ward, even though Miami held firm control of that game the entire way, Cam Ward didn't have a crazy good game. No touchdowns, about 200 total yards. That's a pretty subpar performance for the Heisman frontrunner, as they say. Not I. A&M, one of Florida's 3 losses, puts in Marcel Reed, the guy who put up 33 on Florida and beat us. And they go on a 31-6 run at the end, or something crazy like that, to beat LSU. Or it was like 31-6 in the second half. And man, Texas A&M under Mike Elko looks good. First-year head coach doing whatever he really wanted to LSU in the second half. I mean, LSU just couldn't stop Marcel Reed. I wonder if that's going to be a sign of things to come for when Florida plays LSU with our mobile QB, DJ Lagway. You had Ohio State with Ryan Day. Man, he might not be on every fan's hot board to replace Billy if Billy is fired. Ryan Day is slowly slipping from Ohio State. I mean, they won, which, hey, all that matters is winning now that you have conference locked-in spots for the playoff, auto qualifiers for the playoff. So all that matters for Ohio State is winning. But, man, they play Penn State next week, and they're lucky that it can't be a whiteout at night in Happy Valley. But Penn State does lose Drew Aller, and who knows how long he's going to be out. They had Bo Perbola, I believe his name was, come in, step in and go crazy. I mean, we had the comeback win, I'm pretty sure, against Wisconsin. Oregon just continues to dominate. No real threat from them. What about Vandy, though? They come up close, 3 points to beating Texas. A week after the Georgia game, we play Texas. Texas has a bye week this week, though. But that game's going to be at 11 a.m. Central Time kickoff. Break that game down next Sunday. That's going to be an exciting kick. Could the Gators pull an upset off there? And I also, for me personally, fantasy, I have college fantasy. I win again. But I have a real big dilemma. I have DJ Lagway on my fantasy team. Do I start DJ Lagway against Georgia? So far in his 2 starts, he's been one of the best quarterbacks in for my fantasy. He had like 450 yards against, Stanford. And he had another 300 against Kentucky. Is that a worthy starting QB for fantasy? For me, would be a risky play. But let's start off with some of the topics of this show. So the first thing I think we need to talk about, we got to some disputes on who the Gators should start. I think the biggest one people are going to look at is Montrell Johnson and Jaden Ball. Now, Montrell Johnson has 373 rushing yards on the season, 5.3 yards per carry, and 4 touchdowns. Montrell's biggest game, I think, was Tennessee. Florida, Montrell's another one of those injuries against Tennessee, like Graham Mertz, where if Montrell doesn't get hurt, maybe Florida beats Tennessee. Montrell, obviously, in his 4th season as in college, 3rd season starting for UF. I don't think there's any chance that Montrell doesn't start unless he doesn't play. But I feel pretty confident that Montrell will play against Georgia. Big rivalry game, a lot on the line, especially looking at the other side with Georgia's backfield. We all know who the starting running back for the Georgia Bulldogs is right now. So I think Montrell is definitely going to want to suit up. But you do have Jaden Ball with 259 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns, 4.9 yards per carry, 5 touchdowns against Kentucky. Although, as impressive as it looked then, not going to take away from it, it does look a little bit less impressive now, as we just saw Jarquez Hunter, who's one of the best running backs in the SEC at Auburn, go for 200 yards on Kentucky. So this Kentucky defense might be falling off a bit, especially coming off that loss to Vanderbilt. So I don't think there is as much of a question of who should start as people want to think there is. Because obviously you see the more explosive freshman running back come in and put up 5 touchdowns. Then there's Montrell Johnson, who gets more carries against better defensive fronts, which I think does paint a worse picture on people's head than it should. Because he's going to be facing this Georgia front that's going to have multiple 5-stars, some of the best defensive linemen in the country, including Michael Williams. And you look at the past, you look at that Texas A&M game, you see that Texas A&M defensive line is elite. And Montrell didn't have the best game there, but I think you can also point to that Texas A&M D-line. And then, like, you can say, oh, Will Ball or Jacoby Jackson even, the JUCO transfer, had a bit more success. That's also later in the game, like maybe against their backups. He's not doing it against their starters. Montrell's also that guy who you put in there, and he's going to wear down the defensive front, which will allow Ball to come in and hopefully break off a big play. Jackson come in and do the exact same thing. Maybe even open up the running back, the halfback wheel. You know, back in 2020 when the Gators beat Georgia, halfback wheels dominated them. Could we see us try to do that again? I think the Ball is a bit better of a receiving back than Montrell is. So we'll see that to come. The next starting dispute I want to talk about, this is more of a fun one and a lot more of a actual debate on who should start. And it's really neither of, oh, well, I think this guy's better. It's not a younger guy coming up against an older guy. It's 2 players from the same class at star. You have Aaron Gates and Sharif Denson. Coming off the Tennessee game, you saw Sharif Denson get the interception on Nico. Denson, a really physical star, has good tackling abilities, good in coverage. And you saw everyone saying, man, this kid is the future. He's going to light it up here in Gainesville. Then you saw against Kentucky, Aaron Gates, more athletic, still really good tackler, good in coverage as well. You saw him have an insane game against Kentucky. So then you have people saying, oh man, this guy's the future. So which is it? Well, you have Sharif Denson, who is the true sophomore. He did not redshirt last season. We saw him play a lot against FSU in particular last season, had an astounding game. Then you have Sharif Denson or Aaron Gates, who took his red shirt last season, didn't play. got a year to get his body closer to the SEC standard, and now we see him playing well. I think we start Denson, but it's very close, and both of these guys are going to get a ton of playing time, and maybe we see them both on the field. I think that's something that could be very interesting to look out for. Another probably less likely starting dispute, with Jason Marshall possibly out for the season. We don't know. I've heard that he's going to be out. I've also heard that he's going to try to play and that there's not severe damage. But we really won't know until we see these injury reports on Wednesday. But if he doesn't play, the two corners who are likely to start are going to be Devin Moore, who's been cornerback 2 next to Marshall the entire season, unless he's been hurt, and Dijon Johnson. With the injury of Jakeem Jackson, even without Jakeem, Dijon's really took the spot above Jakeem. I think Dijon's played really well this season. So I think those two are likely not really going to have any worry about who's behind them. But the name that everybody is looking out for, Cormani McClain, the former 5-star top 15 prospect, went to Colorado, transfers to Florida. Everybody saw what he did against Kentucky. Now, that was also on the backup, the third-string QB for Kentucky. Really weird quarterback dynamic there because they bring in Gavin Wimsatt with Vandergriff obviously starting. They bring in Wimsatt a good bit and more to run the ball. But they also had another QB, I can't remember his name, who when they sat Vandergriff, it was him and not Wimsatt come in. He's the one who threw the pick six, through the pass deflection from that Cormani got in the end zone. So you do have a lot of people claiming that Cormani should play because of his 5-star status and what he did against Kentucky. Now, what do I think of this? It's one game. One game, third, fourth quarter he played against some not so great receivers at Kentucky, not so great quarterback at Kentucky. I say you do see him play against Georgia. I think his athleticism and his wingspan especially is too much to keep off the field. You need to put him on the field. If Carson Beck especially starts dialing it up against us, you're going to need somebody who, if Carson Beck makes that great throw, that can still break up those coverages. That's the thing with Jakeem, why he was ranked so highly out of high school. It's his upside. Same thing with Cormani. So those are definitely some really interesting dynamics we have. Mouse went off. But it's going to be a really fun game this weekend. I'm still deciding if I'm going to go to this game. Tickets aren't too bad. I went to this game in 2019. That was the first time that I ever went to this game. 2017, Georgia won. Close game, obviously. Controversial call with what should have been called an incomplete pass on, I can't remember who it was for Georgia, but they call it complete. Georgia ends up winning. Unlucky. I also went to the game in 2021, one of Dan Mullen's last games. Georgia, it's a really close game. Anthony Richardson starts, but the story wasn't the offense in the first half. It was really the defense. Because remembering this game, Georgia, it was 3-0 with like 4 minutes remaining before halftime. And then a bunch of just turnovers. You have a big play from Stetson Bennett for a touchdown. And then next thing you know, it's 3-0, and then it's 24-0 at halftime, and the game's over. it's been a kind of closer rivalry than we said. Last season, I was at the game. Saw the first drive of the game. Eugene Wilson tears up the Georgia secondary, but then after that, it was all dogs. Nothing the defense could do. Defense last year was obviously really pretty bad. Didn't really go back to Trey Wilson after that first drive for some reason. I think that's something we're going to need to see this year if we're going to want to beat Georgia. Let's go further back, though. 2014, Georgia's a top 15 team in the country. They still have some hopes, maybe of winning the SEC, maybe winning a national, of making the playoffs. You have Will Muschamp, the coach of the Gators, who at this point, pretty much done. Like, everyone's saying he's going to be fired. The last season, they went 4-8, 4-7, 4-8, I think. That next season, 2014, was still very mediocre. Florida, big underdog, maybe one of the biggest upsets in this series. The Florida Gators upset Georgia, dominate Georgia. But then we still see Will Muschamp get fired a couple of weeks later. Very similar situation then and now. You have Billy Napier coming off a losing season, coming into this game, big underdogs to Georgia. Billy on as hot as a seat as he could be on. Could the Gators pull off the upset? And if they do, does Billy still get fired later on in the season? Because one win over Georgia doesn't secure Billy at all. Because 6-6 got Muschamp fired. 6-6 can still get Billy fired. Very interesting dynamic to see how that plays out. Let's get into another topic. The Gators freshmen are really stepping up this season. Saw him step up last season. I mean, really, Billy's whole tenure, they've been stepping up. Go back to his first year, we saw Trevor Etienne especially. Maybe the best we saw Etienne at Florida. Crazy game in South Carolina. Pretty good game against Georgia, too. But now we know where Etienne is. But let's get into the freshmen this year. Obviously, starting QB, 5-star DJ Lagway. 2 starts for the Gators. Record-breaking starts in both of them, really. Nearly breaks the all-time record for passing yards in a game in his first career start. Now, that was against Georgia. Stanford, sorry. That was against Stanford. But still, that's an all-time Florida record. So you've had many other chances for players to break that record. He gets second or third on the all-time list from that game. Don't remember off the top of my head. Also see him against Tennessee lead a game-tying drive to send it to overtime. DJ Lagway saw it last weekend against Kentucky. 300 yards, does have the 1 turnover, is a freshman, leads the Gators to a 49-20 win over Kentucky, or 48-20 win over Kentucky. It's one of those freshmen that it's like you see him, it's kind of like how Trevor Lawrence was, and you're like, that play he just made, that's not something you see a freshman do. Now, a lot of times you'll see a player like Lagway where they only have 7 completions but 250 yards. And you're like, oh, well, he probably had a lot of turnover-worthy plays, just did some big plays. But you see Lagway do some smart things. He throws the ball away, doesn't really throw it into bad coverage too often. Obviously, he does have a couple picks on the season. That one bad one against Tennessee. And the bad one against Kentucky. Not really 100% sure what happened there against Kentucky. But threw the pick anyways. So DJ Lagway is just another one of those freshmen that are going crazy for us. Obviously, our running back, Jaden Ball. I know Bama really wanted him coming out of high school. He was committed to Arkansas before flipping to Florida. 5 touchdowns against Kentucky, 120-something yards, I think. Just on a defensive line that we thought was really good. He's had a pretty decent season as well before that. Most of the season he spent as the RB3 or RB4 even behind Jacoby Jackson. But we used to see him start to break out. But I already talked enough about Lagway and Ball earlier in the show. Another freshman, we got Tank Hawkins. Early in the season, he was hurt. Saw him get a touchdown pass against Samford from Lagway. I think Hawkins is someone that we kind of need to see against Georgia. His speed is just something that you don't teach. It's speed that Georgia's linebackers, yeah, they're some of the fastest linebackers in the country, but they can't keep up with this guy. Nobody can keep up with this guy. So I feel like we also need to see him more. Miles Graham. We've seen a lot more of Miles Graham lately. Our linebacker room, man, they have so many deep bodies at the linebacker room. Saw him play a good bit against Kentucky. Linebacker is a much tougher position to play as a freshman, as you do have your worries about their body being able to sustain SEC level play for 12 games a season, 8 SEC games a season with our schedule, 9 or 11 power conference games a season, and it's about the Sim 10 next year. So now no matter who that freshman linebacker is, it's nice to see him get a lot of snaps. Obviously, his father, Ernest Graham, a Gator great. Hopefully, we see Miles Graham become a Gator great and continue to play a ton. We also have L.J. McRae. He had a really good game against Kentucky as well. Didn't get too many snaps, but on those snaps he did have, he was getting past his offensive lineman. He was getting to the quarterback, had a roughing the passer call. I'm not sure how much that really was roughing, if it was roughing the passer. But they called it. The next play and play before that, though, he was also getting past his man pretty easily one-on-one. Quick plays from Kentucky, not really plays where you're going to be able to get sacks. And I also want to talk about Aaron Gates, as I said he is a redshirt freshman, so a lot of people still call him freshman. Also playing a ton, redshirt last season, as we mentioned earlier. His athleticism is really the difference. His mom and dad were both college athletes. I believe his mother was a track star. I can't remember what his dad did, but he has that SEC speed to keep up with really anybody line up against him, and he's developing that physicality as well to where he can play every down in the SEC. But man, let's get into that time. We need to get ready to pick this Georgia game. Going into this game every single year, I always find a way to get myself to believe in the Gators. Last year, we saw Florida put up 41 points on South Carolina before the bye week. Enormous comeback. 5-2. Had a lot of hype for us going into that Georgia game. Saw how that went. 2022, I still convinced myself that Anthony Richardson, man, there's no athlete like him. If he's just on his game, he can beat anybody in the country. Well, he still couldn't beat Georgia. So there was that. 2021, that was probably the last time where I actually really had myself convinced that, man, we might actually do it. Anthony Richardson getting his first career start At the time, I didn't think there was anybody like Anthony Richardson. That still is pretty true. There is nobody like him, but he just wasn't developed enough, and nor was he the next season. And that 2021 team wasn't that bad. The team kind of just gave up. So we had some faults. But I think the first thing we need to talk about in this game, Florida's offense versus Georgia's defense. Love talking about our team's offense, don't we? So the first thing we need to talk about, Georgia's defense has been pretty prone to giving up big plays. Saw it against Mississippi State when they faced another freshman in Michael Van Buren. Gave up big plays, allowed that Mississippi State offense to just keep them in the game. Not really keep them in the game, but keep it within striking distance. But if they are worried about giving up those big plays, maybe through the air, maybe that opens up the opportunity for Florida to get some big plays through the ground. Or maybe they're worried about giving up those big plays on the ground to Lagway with his mobility, that they leave a safety. They just leave one high safety in Elijah Badger or Chimere Dike, what they've been doing all year, just winning those one-on-one coverages. Aiden Mizell, I want to see more of him. Maybe they leave him open. Big play happens, and boom, just like that, Florida's up. Get a lucky stop. And, maybe Florida can get off to a hot start in this game and take all the momentum. I think Florida is definitely a team that, if we stay away from injuries and we get up early, is a team that doesn't usually blow big leads. Also, there is one caveat to this, though. Glenn Schumann has been Georgia's defensive coordinator for a long time. He's the next guy waiting to be like the next Dan, trying to be like the next Dan Lanning, just waiting for somebody to give him that big opportunity. So, Lagway. So how does he scheme up things? How does Napier scheme up the offense to break free from the clutches of that Georgia defense? We saw last week Georgia's defense got 7 sacks on the Texas. There was one play I noticed where they switch in the last second before they snap the ball to an all-out blitz, 0 deep, and it just confused Quinn. He just had to get rid of it as quickly as possible. How much could we see that from Georgia? How well does Lagway react to that? I don't think he's seen anything like that in his career. Now there will be film review. He notices that. He does have more mobility than Ewers does. So maybe they bring that all blitz, but just one man misses it. We find a way to pick it up, and then there's no linebackers, no safeties deep, and Lagway's able to scramble in. But that defensive front is still very scary. Michael Williams really leading that defense with having 2 sacks against Texas. I mean, we know Texas has a really good offensive line, especially when you look at Kelvin Banks Jr., so a top 10 draft pick in the NFL. But Georgia was still able to get past them. How does our offensive line stand up? We've seen our offensive line step it up since the bye week. Saw it against UCF. We've dominated the trenches. Tennessee, really good defensive team, really good defensive line. I think the offensive line did really well as they almost as well as they could against Tennessee. Really good first half. Not so good second half. So how well do we play? I mean, Jake Slaughter, he's really stepped it up last week. going against that Deontay Walker, the nose tackle for Kentucky. So how can he handle Georgia? Feel like he really improved in run blocking. He's been one of the best pass blockers all year, but the run blocking still had some questions left for it. Can he do the same thing? Austin Barber, really great right tackle. I think he has a good chance to be a starting right tackle. I keep emphasizing right tackle for a reason. In the NFL, left tackle still not as used to it, still not as good off the left side. Had a really tremendous game against Kentucky, though. We saw us move Cameron Waits to play at left guard a bit against Kentucky, taking some stuff off Kenjaya Harris. Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon, he's been pretty good for Florida. Not the highest upside guy, but he's a solid right tackle. But how does he do against these very talented defensive linemen for Georgia? That's really the question we do not know the answer to. They're going to really need to step up, though, if the Gators want to win this game. One big plus for the Gators. In the first half, Georgia will be missing former 5-star Jonel Aguero, starting star, out because of the targeting in the second half against Texas. He will be replaced by former 4-star out of Boone, Orlando High School, Ja'Cory Thomas. Border 3-star guy. Anybody at Georgia, really, they're going to be developed well. So how do the Gators match up without him on there? Put our slot receiver, which could be DK, who has a lot of speed. You can create some favorable matchups with him. Georgia will also be without their second leader in tackles, starting free safety Rod Jackson. Senior, maybe safety, one of the most important positions, because that's how they're going to give up those big plays. However, he is backed up by top 10, I believe, prospect KJ Bolden out of Buford High School. And he's played a lot at Georgia this season. Was committed to FSU, flipped to Georgia, and played okay. He is a freshman. He hasn't been as good as like a Malachi Starks was as a freshman for Georgia. But he is somebody I can see making that freshman mistake, that rookie mistake, as everyone says. Can Florida get a deep bomb early in this game in that first half, take advantage of the weak secondary, get some early points up on the board, maybe surprise Georgia there, maybe go for some trick plays? I know a lot of people hate on Billy Napier for some of the trick plays he runs, especially the one we ran against FSU last year. But this isn't the same Georgia defense that we have seen in past. It's really one we can take advantage of. And Georgia, they have really good linebackers. Is Ismail Bundin playing? I know he's missed a couple games for Georgia. I assume he's playing. Former 5-star, former Florida target as well under Dan Mullen. Been at Georgia for a long time. He knows our system. Former top 100 player Raylan Wilson is also going to play a ton of snaps for Georgia. They have really good linebackers. Can probably read the quarterback well. Will DJ Lagway make that freshman mistake that their linebackers can take advantage of? Will our offensive line get confused by maybe some of the linebacker blitz packages that Georgia will have? I guess we will see. But maybe the most important part of this entire game, the Florida defense versus this Georgia offense. What is Carson Beck? Carson Beck has 1,000 993 yards on the year. That's pretty good. That's going to be on pace for probably over 3,000. Has had a couple 400-yard games against Bama and Mississippi State. I know that. But what did we see versus Texas? 3 interceptions. He has 8 interceptions on the year, with, I believe, over half of them coming in the Texas and Alabama game alone. Is that the true Carson Beck? Coming into the year, I thought Carson Beck was the best quarterback in the nation, and he was my Heisman pick to start the season. But as we've seen him play, Mike Bobo is not the best offensive coordinator, most would say, or even that good of an offensive coordinator, most would say. Definitely missing out Todd from last year, now with the Ravens. But what Carson Beck will we get? 15 touchdowns to 8 picks on the season. That's less than a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio, which is not what you want out of your veteran QB. Florida, in the past, since the bye week, has been getting after the QB. George Gums has really stepped it up to be maybe one of the most underrated edge rushers in the SEC. According to a metric standpoint, George Gums has been higher rated than Princely Umanamillion from Ole Miss, a player that some Gator fans were happy to see leave, some weren't, and didn't think that we would replace him. Tyreek Sapp, also really good pass rusher, 3.5 sacks on the season. Maybe we'll see more of the freshman LJ McCray. As I said, against Kentucky, he was kind of getting some pass rush. But I think the main thing that everybody is looking at, you're going to see it on game day. They're going to talk about it. The announcers during the game, they're going to talk about it. Trevor Etienne. It's drying here. Trevor Etienne. How badly does the Gator defense want revenge on him? 2007, Florida versus Georgia. Obviously, 2007 is the year Tim Tebow won the Heisman. Maybe a less known part, unless you're part of this rivalry game. Touchdown, Georgia, their first drive. Noshawn Moreno runs it in. The entire Georgia sideline rushes onto the field. They get a penalty. Sportsmanlike conduct, probably. They get a penalty for it. They go on to win the game. 2008, obviously the year Florida ends up winning the national championship. Georgia isn't as good as they were the previous season, but bad taste in the Gators' mouth coming from that 2007 game. You know who still is their running back for that Georgia team? Noshawn Moreno. What? You have one of the best linebackers in all of college football for the Gators, Brandon Spikes. What does he do? He absolutely lays out Moreno. He starts trash talking to him. He says he's throwing every obscenity in the book at him, laying on top of him, Gator crawling on him. Doesn't get flagged for it, luckily. But my goodness, what are we going to see from the team this year? Obviously, Shamar James came in the same class as Etienne did. Shamar touched on it. But yeah, they definitely want revenge, I think. Are they going to be able to get it? I think they can. I think this Georgia offensive line, not as strong as we've seen, still pretty young. How healthy is this Georgia offensive line? I would assume Tate Rutledge is going to play. Big rivalry game like this. but he's probably not going to be at 100%. Cam Jackson and Caleb Banks, two maybe not the best pass rushers, but really solid run defenders, create the space for a Pup Howard, Shamar James to come in and make that big tackle and really set Florida's plan on this game. I think that's going to be the key to get to the game. If we can get in Etienne's head and tell him, man, you should not have left here, we're going to have to own you now. Gators can really set a dominant start to this game. Etienne on the season has 422 yards, 7 touchdowns, 5.1 yards per carry. We all know how good of a running back Trevor Etienne is. He's going to get his chance at the NFL. Not like his brother Travis without the backfield and everything. He's still good out the backfield. Bit more shifty, though, in my opinion, is Trevor. Georgia does seem to not run to him as much as they should, though. Does Etienne call for them to run him? Does he tell his coordinator, like, man, this is my game. Let me put my mark on this rivalry. But if he does that, you know the Gators are going to want that sweet, sweet revenge. Georgia's receivers are very interesting. Dylan Bell, really good receiver, hasn't been that consistent. You can't really put 2 games back-to-back. Can't really put back-to-back games together. No, what Rob just said right here, man. Oh, let me get my mouse. Rob just said it right here. We need to avoid that disastrous quarter that's plagued us the past few games against Georgia. Man, I said it, that 2021 game was literally a 3 minutes. But man, we have what I assume, and I'm not a Florida fan, but do you want to lose? I'll answer that right after I make this pick. So what are the keys to success for Florida? What will help Florida win this game? Well, one, I think we need to let DJ Lagway loose. We're not going to beat Georgia by playing Billy Ball, by playing it safe and letting Georgia beat themselves. Pause. That's not how it's going to work. We're going to need DJ Lagway to avoid a couple sacks. We're going to need to allow him to get out the pocket, make some creative play calls. That's how Florida can win this game. Then I just said we need to stop the run. If we can stop Etienne, put this game on Beck's shoulders, and get that pass rush, we can really stop Georgia. We saw it against Kentucky. Only 13 points in that game. And we just saw what we did to Kentucky, and our offense did to Kentucky, and our defense did to Kentucky. As it says, this isn't the 2021 or 2022 Georgia team. They are beatable. Amen to that, brother. And 3, we have to score touchdowns in the red zone. Saw it against Tennessee. 1 of 4 in the red zone in the first half in general, and that one being a field goal. If we want to beat Georgia, we can't settle for field goals. Can't settle for 4th down turnover on downs. We need to score touchdowns. Billy, you can't beat yourself against Georgia. Pause again. What do I think the final score is going to be? I hate picking against my team. I've been going over this the past 3 weeks. Talking myself into picking Florida and why the Gators will pull the upset. But Kirby Smart is the better coach. Kirby Smart has the better roster. Kirby Smart has the better assistants. But does Kirby Smart's team believe? That team has all the talent, but I feel like they've just been coasting and letting their talent do the work for them. Kind of a lot like the 2009 Florida Gators, where, yes, they went undefeated in the regular season, but then they met Alabama in the SEC championship game, and they just got smoked. I think college football is a lot closer now, though. And I think you can run into that team that's going to stump you up. I have written down 30-22, Georgia. But you know what I say to that? Give me the Gators, baby. I'm going to pick the Gators 33-30. Pull the upset. 16.5 points is the spread right now. We're going to cover that. Give me the over in this game. And Gators are going to pull it out. I believe this team's improvement since the bye week has just been remarkable. The fight this team has for Billy Napier, they're going to come out and play with everything they've got. And I can't say the same for Georgia based off the team we've seen lately. And where do the Gators go from that? Well, we got asked a few minutes ago. I'm not a Florida fan. Do you want to lose the rest of games to get a new head coach? Well, you know what I'm going to say to that? We don't have to lose the rest of our games to get a new coach. We have to win 2 just to reach a bowl game. We fired Kirby Smart in 2014 after making a bowl game. But, you know, I don't know if there's a coach available that I want right now. I mean, you look at the top targets, Lane Kiffin, he's really fallen off I'm off the Lane train. I think that train is derailing into the Ocklawaha River. And you just said it again. Say Florida does find a way to upset Georgia like I just predicted. Texas is also beatable. Vandy almost beat them. 27-24. It is at Austin in DKR Stadium. But it's an 11 Central kick. Ewers, just like Carson Beck, has not been to the standard that you'd expect from him. Florida could pull that upset too. And you know who Florida plays right after Texas at home in the swamp? Might get that night game if Florida does pull one of these upsets. Currently, I think like a 4 to like 8 o'clock flex schedule start time. LSU. Oh, my bad. If I said Kirby, my fault. I didn't mean Muschamp. Sadly, I don't agree. To beat UGA, you have to create one-on-one matchups and take advantage. But Billy is terrible and would run right into Georgia's game plan. 31-16, Georgia. 15-point game. That does include Florida covering the spread. Again, this is a very talented Georgia team still. If Kirby has these boys ready to put their lives on the line to win this game, I do see it very hard for Florida to win this game. But I think Billy's going to have this team ready to die in this game. I'm seeing improvement from the Gators. I was very impressed last week. I mean, yeah, I'm right there with you. I've been impressed since that UCF game. UCF's not the best team, but Florida was doing things that we haven't seen them do since 2018, 2019, making open field tackles, rushing the passer, causing turnovers. I think Florida has five interceptions in the past 3 games. Yeah, 5 interceptions. 3 against Kentucky, 1 Tennessee, 1 UCF, which is, I think, more than all of last season. We did just see Carson Beck throw for 3 interceptions against Texas. Is that something the Gators can take advantage of to create a short field? One big question I have for this game. How do the Gator fans turn out? I plan on going to this game. Just waiting on one thing to be confirmed before I buy my ticket. But what about the rest of the Gator fans? You look online, Georgia's side of the stadium is more expensive. Like $50 more ticket, probably. Right here. Gator fans need to show up. If we get off to that early lead, we need to keep Beck rattled. We can't just let the team do it. The crowd needs to do it. We've seen before in these 50-50 games where they do. One thing I wish about this game we did that they do at the Red River Rivalry, I like how they split it at the 50. So if they're on your side of the field, you can really explode. You can really explode for your defense, hype them up, and get that big stop. But it does allow, because we do it in the end zone, it does allow for our fans to just be more all around loud. But Gator fans are going to be as crucial as the team in this game. The past few games I've gone to, as I said, the 2021 and 2023 game, it was a substantially more Georgia fans than there was Florida fans. Does DJ Lagway change that? I hope Florida gets back to where they were. It was always Florida and Tennessee when I was growing up in the SEC. You know, you've been nice this stream, so I'm not going to trash Tennessee. But, like, my lifetime hasn't been like that. So I don't know how old you are, but in my lifetime, it's been Florida, Georgia. That actually reminds me of another stat. First year since 1992 that the divisions are no more. Going back to 2015, the winner of the Florida-Georgia game has won the SEC East. 2015 Gators, 2016 Gators. Okay. I was watching 1992, 2003. Makes sense. 2013, 2014, Missouri won the SEC East. 2014, obviously, the year Florida upset Georgia, which really, if Georgia wins that game, they probably win the East. I'm not exactly sure of the records, but 2015, Gators beat Georgia. Gators win the East. 2016, Gators beat Georgia. Gators win the East. 2017, 2018, and 2019, Georgia beat Florida. Georgia wins the East. 2020, Florida beats Georgia. Florida wins the East. 21-23, Georgia beats Florida. Georgia wins the East. With no longer having divisions, I wonder how in the future, especially, that impacts. Can we see if Florida gets back to where they were? Did Florida win the East in the COVID year? Yes, they did. Remember, the SEC championship game was like 52-48. Alabama ended up beating Florida. Florida beat Georgia in 2020, 45-28 maybe. I can't remember the exact score off the top of my head. It was something 40-28, I think. And then we lost to LSU in the last week of the season before the SEC championship game, which ended our playoff hopes. Very sad times, but still, move on from that. Got my boy Jackson here. I just went on the Jacksonian and go check out his show. Tell your friends and family and cashiers at Publix and Walmart about the magic that Tyler brings to Florida at the voice of college football. Yes, I don't know what channel everyone's watching this on right now, but come to the Florida at the voice of college football. Come like, come subscribe. I'm hoping to bring a lot more content. This episode, I was supposed to have a Georgia fan on. I had a really cool draft thing we were going to do with all-time Florida and Georgia players, build our all-time squads from this game alone, but never came to be because he had to pull out last minute. It's an unfortunate thing that happened, but I hoping to have someone on for Texas for next week's show. I did just mention all-time Florida Georgia squads, so I had to pull out, but I'll do one real quick. Maybe in the comments if you guys have any honorable mentions or anything you want to talk about. Go ahead and do so. At quarterback, I think you have two options here, really. 2020, Kyle Trask, he went for like 450 yards, I think, in that game, which was like, I think that's the all-time record for this game. That's the obvious choice. However, how can you pass up the opportunity to take the GOAT, Tim Tebow? 2008, the Heisman, or not the Heisman season, sorry, 2007 Heisman season, but 2008, I mean, we just dominated them. Tebow didn't need to throw the ball over the field, but they still went down the field easily. So you're really between those two. But I'm going to go Tebow. Got to respect the GOAT. Running back. I'm just going to go with from one game, two-parter. 2015. Kelvin Taylor, Fred Taylor's son, and Matt Jones. One of them went for like 193 yards. The other went for like 180. We only threw for like 27 yards that game, but we ran all over Georgia. Gators win. That's who I'm going to have to go with for that game for running backs. Receiving, tight ends easy. You got to go Kyle Pitts against Georgia in 2020. Hell, he even had a good 2019 game against Georgia. Answer a quick question. Could you see Urban Meyer coming back? Quick, short answer. No. It's just not happening. Don't think he's coming back to coaching. Nor do we really want him back. Don't think he's going to fit in this style of college football, where you can just transfer like that. Defense, I'm going to go the 2008 game as well. I mean, Brandon Spikes. You have Brandon Spikes, Major Wright, Joe Hayden, Caleb. What's his name? Caleb. I mean, you have so many players in that defense. It's just such a good defense. And the hate that defense had for Georgia. They could, I think if we had that 08 defense, we'd win this game. Obviously, we don't, but hey, the hate that defense had. Wide receivers. That's a tough one, man, for Florida, because Florida's quarterback play has not been that good outside of like Kyle Trask. So you don't really have as much receiver plays to go off of until you go back to that 08, 07, 06, and before that, which I don't have off the top of my head. Because I didn't do the research because got canceled out. But so going off recent history, Trey Wilson last year had a really good start to that game. The usage went down. I think if we continued to use him a lot last year, he would have had a really good game. A really, really good game. He had a pretty good game, I should say, last year anyways. You still had Trayvon Grimes in that 2020 game who had a pretty good game. Had touchdown. 2019, Freddie Swain had a good game. Then you got to go back to like 2000. I don't even know what happened in 2009. Honestly, that game is kind of a blur. Oh, wait, there are some names that I cannot say, and I will not risk saying on here. But man, the all-time teams could be so fun for this. But Florida, huge opportunity. Billy Napier, huge opportunity. Prove a naysayer wrong, to quote College Game Day. That 2018 was stacked with killers. I mean, you just have the Major Right quote alone. It's like, in the national championship against Oklahoma, he's like, man, I'm running. I see the ball. I'm like, man, I got to go make a play on that ball. But then I see the receiver. I see him. I don't want the ball. I want him. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about Chico here. To quote the Pouncey twins, Chico also got some other wrongdoers on that team in another less legal way. A receiver. I think he had a touchdown in that 2008 game too, so kind of hard to say his name. I'm not going to say his name. But man, this rivalry just really gets me going. I know so many Georgia fans. Like, I've already been trash talking a Georgia fan, all day today. Since the last game ended, Hawaii, Nevada, this morning, I guess, technically. It's been Florida, Georgia hate. Maybe my biggest rival over FSU. I might hate Georgia more than FSU. And I don't know. It's such a weird thing to say. I feel like I hate Georgia much more outside of football than I hate FSU. Maybe it's a conference thing. This is a good question. Do you hate Georgia or Tennessee more? I hate Georgia more. Okay. I've been trying to stay away from it because, like, I don't really see Tennessee as much as a rival. I mean, in my lifetime, Tennessee has only beat Florida 3 times. Exactly. The past 20 years. I turned 20 years old in less than 3 weeks. In the past 20 years, we've owned you. It's hard for me to see it as a rival. We've had some good games. I mean, the game we just played was a really good game. Maybe we're building it back up, kind of like how New Age Tennessee Bama is. Building it back up to be a rivalry. We do have dog catcher 26, 34-10. Assume that emblem's for the dogs. I could see it. Schumann can take advantage of a very, very young quarterback. But I would say next season, I think DJ Lagway would start at Georgia. I think DJ Lagway would start anywhere in the country. I mean, who are you putting above Lagway? Right here. I just want to see a good game. You know, I'm going to spend my hard-earned money on this game. I also just want to see a good game. That's really what it's all about. Well, no, it's not. It's about winning. Because we hate the dogs. Tired of getting barked at by Georgia fans. I'm glad my section should just be Florida fans. Because Florida fans. Because normally I sit pretty close to the sideline or pretty close to the border. So it's more mixed. If Napier gets fired, Lagway's gone. Napier's not out of the woods yet. I don't think that's fully true. DJ Lagway and his parents both really like Florida. They really like Napier. So there is that. We're also paying Lagway a good amount of money. He does really like Napier, but I have a sneaking suspicion Napier's going to find a way to save his job this year. Right here. Grown adults barking like dogs. Man, I'm a grown adult doing a Gator chomp. I was in Starkville for the Florida-Mississippi State game. I had Gator fan. Well, he said he's a Gator alum. He's just wearing Mississippi State gear, barking at me. Like, bro, you're not even the best bulldog. I'm the best dog in this conference. Like, that's pretty interesting. At least Georgia fans have won. And Georgia fans can back it up. However, did annoy some Mississippi State fans there in Starkville. This one in particular. Man, you know what? I also went to the Ole Miss Georgia Southern game. Was talking to this Ole Miss fan. He was talking a lot of smack about Florida. And he was talking about Ole Miss and like, oh my goodness, Lane Kiffin's going to be here forever and Ole Miss is going to be making the playoff. Man, how those Rebels fell off. And Lane Kiffin's really fallen off the Florida board too now. You already had some people willing to excuse some of his shenanigans from the past when they were projected to do good. But now they're going to miss the playoffs nearly for sure. Might fall all the way down to 8 wins. Man, it's dry here. That Ole Miss fan said he's going to try and make it to that Florida Ole Miss game, which is on the 23rd. I want to say the 23rd. I hope I see him because I want to see his opinion now. He was saying DJ Lagway is going to go to Ole Miss. It's the funniest thing I heard. Ole Miss couldn't even get Arch Manning to go there. I just saw the comment. The most difficult part about this, you now have to actually think about it. If you would have asked me this question a month ago, you do not want to know what my response would have been. I would have kept it professional. But if you asked me in private a month ago, what would have my response been? It would have been way different. Let's just say that. Colorado is now deservedly in the top 25. That's just crazy. I mean, you got to give all the respect in the world to what Dion has done. And that's why I'm starting to actually think about it. Oh, man. Feels wrong. Don't think it will happen. I could see Dion trying to go to the NFL to follow his boy Shadur. Or just quitting football. I don't think he stays at Colorado past this year. You know what? I actually would be really impressed with him if he does stay at Colorado. Oh, man. This question, that might have to become a segment of his own. Could Dion actually work at Florida? We know he's really burnt. I don't think we can say he's officially burnt that bridge. Yeah, I don't think we can officially say he's officially burnt the bridge with FSU. I mean, he stole Hunter from them. There's actually been a lot of trash talk behind like Dion and FSU. Dog catchers is going to FSU. When would he go to FSU is my question. FSU can't really afford to fire Mike Norvell right now. Mike Norvell's buyout is $56 million. Now everyone's like saying Billy's buyout is big. Billy's is less than half that, $26 million. Although that does make me wonder, would FSU boosters just putting up the money if you told them they were getting Dion? Would Dion put his own money? No, no. You know, I hate and I love that we actually have to discuss if Dion's a worthy candidate to be a head coach at the University of Florida. I know there are Gator fans there that would love that idea, It's just difficult, man. To me, Florida is a better job than Florida State. More money. Maybe. Florida does also play in the SEC still. Florida's going to play the toughest schedule the back-to-back years. We have almost the exact same schedule minus one game and switch home and home for SEC games. 1 second, guys. So you're going to be playing in the Premier Conference, playing in big games with other elite talent. I biasly agree that Florida's a better job than FSU is. But Florida State's still a good job, and I think if Dion wants to go to FSU will probably have to probably just have to suffice with it. They'll make $50 million right back with the hiring of Deion Sanders. I do see that. Well, you also have to add in, okay, they're firing Norvell, so that's 56 right there. They got to hire Dion. That's probably another 10 million plus, maybe. I don't know what the contract for Dion is. How much is Dion making at Colorado? Mm-hmm. So it's estimated he's made Colorado around $280 million. Let me figure out one last thing. Dion's making roughly $6 million at Colorado a year. So you got to increase it by probably at least 3. So probably anywhere between 8 to 10 million. Can you imagine the recruits Dion could get at Florida? Man, I could. Cormani McClain had been at Florida originally. I just worry about diva activities at UF. I just don't know if Dion want to come to Florida, you know? FSU, Florida is on moderate, no big rivals. I mean, I think it depends how burnt. If that bridge with FSU is really that burnt, then man, I could see him coming to Florida just to spite FSU. He would make that Florida FSU matchup really like how Spurrier made all his rivalries. But then if you're FSU, say you fire Mike, that's 56 right there. Hire Dion, that's another 10 right there. You probably have to, I don't know who the buyout for Dion, that's probably another 1 to 2 million, I'd assume. I know there's some coaches out there that have crazy buyout clauses. You have a whole staff he's going to have to hire. That's probably another $8 million, $7 million. No, okay, it's not. Let's see. You probably have like 3 assistants that make near $3 million more. Yeah, so around $6-7 million assistants. Then you still gonna have to have your whole recruiting class, your transfer class, but you do make that. If you're University of Florida, UF makes so much money hiring Dion. We'd make 20 times more than what Colorado does. Oh no! I just realized, as a fan, if we were to hire Dion, Florida's ticket price is already really, really expensive. They'd go up so much more. Dude, like, man, oh my goodness, that would be so expensive. To even just go to a Florida versus Samford game. Like, those are now the cheap tickets. Like, they'd be what we consider like more expensive tickets now, probably. I mean, you're a Tennessee fan, or you're a Georgia fan. That'd probably affect you too for that Florida-Georgia game. Because people are going to want to come just to see Dion. Dion could turn Florida into what Miami was back in the bad boy Miami days, criminals versus the convicts. And with all the notoriety. Man, I don't know. I have to do way more research into that, though. But this was a fun show, everybody. I gotta go. I hope to have a video up on some recruiting news. Florida, actually, last thing. Florida has the 50th recruiting class in the country. FSU has the 48th recruiting class in the country. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share the channel. If you're on the Georgia, or if you're on Twitter, come to Florida, the Voice of College Football channel. Like, subscribe, tune into all the videos, shows, and I will see you guys in the next one.